A long time ago, in a Blockbuster video which has likely since been turned into a chicken tender fast food place, we had a wealth of options when it came to the Star Wars video games we could pick out and play. There was just so much variety on those store shelves. You would look in one direction and see Star Wars Demolition, a Twisted Metal like sitting next to Masters of Terrascasi, a fighting game, and next to that, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, a Hitman game. And that variety is something we have kind of been missing in the world of Star Wars video games over the last, at least, decade at this point. Not to say we haven't had some great Star Wars video games, but they feel like they can largely be partitioned into three main categories. Those being action-adventure games, think your Star Wars Outlaws, the Jedi series, Lego Star Wars even. Then you have shooty games, Battlefront, Squadrons, because that is basically a full game of a Battlefront mode, and then the mobile VR sector, which kind of encompasses every single video game released with the Star Wars name since 2015. But following the week of the Game Awards 2025, looking ahead to the Star Wars games in 2026, and even further beyond that in the horizon, it does, to me, feel like Star Wars games are back to having some interesting variety in them. Maybe not to the extent that we had during the PS2, sure, but at the very least, between every Force Unleashed and Battlefront, we can maybe now get something like a Super Bombad Racing again. So leading into the Game Awards 2025, Star Wars was in the news circuit when it came to gaming, not specifically for anything tied to the show, rather talking about a Star Wars video game series, a type of Star Wars game that has been missing from this modern age. RPGs. Specifically, an RPG people have been waiting for a very long time. That's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Remake. That was announced in 2021. Came back in the news. If you forgot about it, I don't blame you, because this was at one point a collaboration between Aspyr, the team responsible for many of the modern Star Wars remaster re-releases on digital storefronts, and Sony PlayStation. This was revealed at one of the first PS5 showcases. It was eventually shopped around and made its way to the Embracer Group before the Embracer-owned Saber Interactive broke away from Embracer, and as of last fall, straight out of the mouth of the Saber CEO, earlier this year, based off of legal documents, that Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Remake is still in development. It's alive and well, and that's a quote. Thanks to some incredible reporting from Stephen Totilo over on GameFile, we've learned that there is some big drama going on with Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, specifically in that Disney Lucasfilm Games were planning a remake of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 as recent as March of 2025, which led to some big issues with the port of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 that Aspyr was handling. It's a fascinating report that I recommend reading. The big takeaway relevant to where we're going today on Rantable is this idea that KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic, this beloved RPG series, is part of Disney's plan for Star Wars in the short to long term, which is interesting to me because Disney, since acquiring Star Wars, has been very specific that all projects they put their stamp on are now canon. They have to fit into the great Star Wars timeline, but KOTOR has always been this tricky thing because yes, the Star Wars MMO, Star Wars The Old Republic, has been ongoing since the acquisition. However, that was just such a large beast to dismantle that it kind of just got the ability to still live on under the Legends Old Extended Universe canon banner that Disney created. So the announcement of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Remake was always a big deal for people like me and many of you watching, and the idea of seeing it brought back, maybe tweaked slightly to fit the greater Star Wars canon we have today, was an exciting prospect. It did feel that it was sort of a mythical game at this point. Then the Game Awards comes around, and the big surprise of the show, the same week of this reporting, is that the Old Republic is back in a big way, kind of dwarfing the announcement, news, and existence of these, I would say, what will probably be modest remake/remasters. Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic. This is the first official big swing into the Old Republic in the Disney era of Star Wars. This is a big deal, and this is something that they have pushed off addressing or really tackling over the last decade and change. The Old Republic name means something. It means opulence. It means grand storytelling, epic large-scale conflict. It means those blur CG trailers for the MMO that went triple platinum on YouTube back in the day. Not only does Of the Old Republic carry so much weight in this announcement, the fact that this brand new single-player RPG is being directed by Casey Hudson. Okay, you are setting up massive expectations for this game that will likely come out at the earliest in like maybe 2030. At least that's what Jason Schreier thinks. But Casey Hudson is saying the game will be out before then. So we'll see. For those who don't know, Casey Hudson is a very prolific game director. He worked on the original Knights of the Old Republic, was a spearhead at BioWare for many, many years, leading development with a lot of the Mass Effect series. But he has come back to the world of sci-fi RPGs and Star Wars RPGs specifically for a brand new single-player RPG with new characters for an all-new story, carrying on with the heart and soul of KOTOR, not being a direct follow-up or sequel to either game, and they are hiring currently. So again, this game is a ways off. But the simple fact that we are once again putting KOTOR on the chessboard of what is possible with Star Wars and Star Wars games and video games overall is enticing, because for the longest time, KOTOR was the bar. KOTOR was the game that all other Star Wars games were compared to. It wasn't only until maybe the Cal Kestis games that people started suggesting we could have a new contender for best Star Wars game ever. But the KOTOR name, the weight behind that, Star Wars being an RPG again, is something that people have been waiting for so incredibly long. And I would argue at this moment in time, even if they were to come out and announce officially Star Wars Jedi 3 tomorrow, this is now the biggest Star Wars project they have cooking in the world of video games. In a world where involved RPGs like a Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring can come out and really enthrall players with deep, interesting systems, player build options, and relationship options, and so much reactivity and interactivity with their worlds. There is a lot of hope being placed on this game being good in a way that is dangerous. But if Fate of the Old Republic, the grand return of Star Wars RPGs from BioWare talent, was the only thing we were talking about today, I wouldn't be loudly claiming that Star Wars is back to the old video game renaissance it had when I was growing up or you were growing up. No, what makes me say that is also another story from the Game Awards, Star Wars Galactic Racer. Probably the biggest news, the most wide-reaching reveal from the Game Awards 2025, aside from Jeff Keighley's relations to pop culture icon Miss Piggy, is the fact that Sebulba survived the Boonta Eve pod race from The Phantom Menace. Star Wars Galactic Racer is a 2026 video game coming to the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series consoles, and PC, and it is being made by Fuse Games, a studio made up of a bunch of talent who worked on games like the Burnout series, Need for Speed, and the Star Wars Battlefront EA games. We saw a wonderful trailer showcasing some locations throughout the Star Wars Skywalker saga, where we see a bunch of different Star Wars vehicles racing throughout the galaxy. It's a simple premise, but it's one that used to be so consistent across a number of video game consoles. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, Racer Revenge, Super Bombad Racing. Like, we had an abundance of these games in the past, and I don't know if anybody really realized how hungry we've been for a new Star Wars racer. It is an exciting prospect, and it is not the only Star Wars video game we know we're getting in 2026 that breaks away from the three types of Star Wars games we've had over the last decade. Because we also know that 2026 will bring us a Star Wars strategy game from BitReactor in collaboration with Respawn Entertainment, we will be getting Star Wars Zero Company, essentially Star Wars XCOM. Again, with talent who did work on XCOM. This one takes place during the Clone Wars era. It is following a ragtag group of misfits from a bunch of different walks of life in the Star Wars galaxy, from a Jedi to a clone to a Mandalorian. It seems like a very fun, very exciting game for fans of Star Wars strategy games. I check both those boxes. And if you have also been looking forward to exploring tactics, specifically during the Clone Wars era, we are eating very well next year. With just how long video games take to make these days, I'm not taking for granted that the stars have aligned where Star Wars in 2026 is largely defined in the world of gaming through a racing game and a tactics game. That's bewildering. Following 10 years of that EA partnership, they made some great games. I enjoyed the first Battlefront for what it was. Battlefront 2 became a celebrated game that I kind of prefer over the original Battlefront 2. I know that's kind of blasphemy to some people, but Battlefront 2 is very good. And we've really only begun to see the fruits of different teams tackling Star Wars. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga and Star Wars Outlaws over at Ubisoft. Both games have their own strengths and did add some variety to the world of Star Wars, but not to the extent as a hardcore crunchy RPG, a racing game, and an XCOM-like tactics game are going to in the near to far future. We undoubtedly have a ways to go beyond 2026 to see Star Wars really hit it big again in gaming, but as long as we get some more variety like this, hopefully we get a glimpse at the third Cal Kestis adventure at some point during 2026, and maybe some other surprises, that would be great. And I will always be hoping that that Casey Hudson game actually releases, unlike one Star Wars Eclipse from David Cage. So how do you feel about the state of Star Wars video games heading into the new year? Is Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic going to be on your radar year in and year out for something you're waiting to hear about? A new game to look forward to, maybe on the next generation of consoles? Or is 2026 the year that you've been waiting for with Star Wars, with Star Wars Zero Company and Star Wars Galactic Racer? Because that is going to be some of the most refreshing Star Wars gaming sessions any of us have had in years. But as always, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to tune into future episodes of Rantable, you can do so right here and over on GameRant.com.